Hello, I'm John from Tiny Tickers. More importantly for this video, I am father to a teenage girl called Zoe who was born with congenital heart disease, and this very briefly is her story. So it starts, I guess, with us going along to our 20-week scan, my wife's 20-week pregnancy scan. We were the classic first-time parents, really excited, thinking we're going to find out whether it's a boy or a girl. We've got grandparents on standby for us to tell them the news, and all of that sort of thing. At the scan, we were told by our sonographer that she couldn't quite see all the views that she needed to get of our baby's heart, and could my wife have a drink, have a walk around and come back 15 minutes later. When we went back into the scan room, there was a senior colleague in there who then did a second scan, and it was during that scan that we really picked up, based on the body language actually of the sonographers, that something was going wrong, and we started to get really anxious. They told us that they felt that our baby's heart didn't look normal. The sonographer told us in a really compassionate and empathetic way. They took us into a side room, which we kind of dubbed the Holby City room, because it was one of those classic sort of bad news rooms. We knew something was not good. It had the watercolours on the wall, it had the box of tissues on the table and some comfy chairs. And it was at that point that they said, right, we think there's something wrong with your baby's heart. We're going to refer you up to the cardiology department. We were very lucky that our local hospital was actually one of the cardiac centres in the UK, so we were then seen by the cardiologist probably about an hour and a half later. Obviously we were really frantic and anxious at this point, really didn't understand what was going on, and trying to get back to like even my basic GCSE biology knowledge of what a heart does. The cardiologist told us that our baby had AVSD, which is basically, in layman's terms, the way they described it was a great big hole in the middle of all four chambers, so the blood's mixing, and one valve instead of two. That's going to require corrective surgery, they told us, and also they gave us a bit of a double whammy. They said that particular condition was quite closely associated with Down syndrome, so there was a possibility that our daughter would have Down syndrome. Now, I've said our daughter because we did also, of course, find out the sex, and we're absolutely delighted to find out we're going to be having a little girl. So obviously it was an incredibly tough afternoon, an incredibly tough appointment. I remember sitting on a bench outside the hospital and just trying to take it all in after we left. Trying to realise kind of this dawning sensation that our lives had just changed, and had probably just changed forever. We had grandparents saying, why haven't you phoned us? What's going on? What's the problems? So quite quickly we had to start breaking that news to our family, to our friends, to work, to everyone who needed to know that what we were about to be going through. It was a really, really tough time. I guess we can fast forward to the next stage in the journey, which is when Zoe was born. She was actually born about 4.5 weeks prematurely, so she went into neonatal intensive care unit for a little while. Initially, the cardiologist said, oh, we'll do the surgery at about 3 to 6 months. She seems to be doing okay. But just when we were going to be going home from hospital, it was actually on a New Year's Eve, because she'd been born just before Christmas. And one of the nurses said, not very happy, I'd like cardiologist just to give her another once over before you go home. Turned out her heart was failing, her sats were dropping, and they decided to whip her straight up to the heart ward and to plan for emergency surgery. So I remember sitting there that night listening to the bongs of Big Ben on the telly, and sort of just really in fear of what was about to come. So Zoe ended up having her surgery when she was 3.5 weeks old. The surgery took 8.5 hours. They corrected her heart, they stitched up the holes, they built a second valve, and it all went really, really well. We saw the surgeon after 8.5 hours. I've got to say, leaving her in theatre was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. My legs would turn into jelly, we were really emotional. I felt as a dad, my first job was to protect my little baby, and I couldn't do anything to help her, and that was a really tough thing for myself and my wife to go through. But the nurses on the ward just looked after us that day. They just told us how to get through it, basically using all of their experience. And when we met the surgeon 8.5 hours later, he explained that he was really delighted with how the surgery had gone, that everything looked good, and it was up to Zoe to sort of, now the next challenge was to get through the coming hours and then days on intensive care ward, which wasn't without his bumps. The first night we were called at 12:30 because her heart was really racing. Her heart rate had really gone through the roof, and they were really concerned about her, and we watched them battling to save her life all over again. But they managed that, and they did. Slowly she got stronger, and after a few days she left and went to high dependency, and then she went to the general ward, and every day she just got that little bit stronger and stronger, and eventually she came home after a few weeks. Fast forward now, she's 14 and a half years old, full of life, full of energy. She does have Down syndrome, but so she has some mobility issues, some developmental issues based on that. In terms of her heart, the AVSD is still repaired. They're very happy with it. There's been no additional surgery required so far, and it doesn't limit her in any way. Her heart repair is really good, so she can lead a full and active life. And we're just so grateful to everyone that was involved in her care and in her treatment. And I come straight back to that first 20-week pregnancy scan, where the way I always just describe it is that sonographer who first spotted that something didn't look normal with Zoe's heart was the first link, the first person in that team that saved her life. And we're just so grateful that she did spot it, and that Zoe has had the opportunity and the chance to have her heart repaired.